It was. Every year we look forward to the Anzac Day clash. It's a massive one, regardless of positions on the ladder between Collingwood and Essendon. Maybe this year it's going to take on a different slant, because did the Bombers get out of the blocks against the Bulldogs? They must have impressed you.
Yeah, they did. And we saw that game, as most people did. Yeah, I just thought Essendon were absolutely fantastic. They certainly have their own version of a defensive half-ground press.
Yep.
Their inside 50s in that game was absolutely phenomenally weighted their way. As well as that, their offensive ball movement was absolutely sensational. So, you know, clearly form side of the competition. The Bombers.
71.
I don't think 71 inside 50s, but I mean, quite often coaches get criticised when things go wrong, and they get overly pumped up when things go well. You know, I think Matthew Knight's was heavily criticised, but you know, Essendon's ball movement has always been pretty good offensively, and I think Matthew Knight has to take a fair bit of credit for that. I mean, I don't think people will want to give him too much credit because he's no longer coach, but there's always a lag period, and I think a lot of the things that Matthew Knight's taught those Essendon players we saw on the weekend.
Mark, you played them in the NAB Cup Grand Final and beat them. Did you think at that point in time you said they might be a real threat this year?
Oh, no doubt. Obviously they had the same game plan, and you know, we struggled with it at times, and it was good to, I suppose, have that type of game prior to round one. They're very hard at it. They've got a terrific defensive plan. Their offensive plan, as Scotty just said, has been on the move for a couple of seasons, but I think they've added to that as well, and they're set up around the stoppages. You know, in terms of that, you're playing against a brand new side, but they've been very, very impressive.
Talk to us about your midfield setup. Obviously, the elite midfield in the competition with some superstars in there. How many rotations do you just run through there? How many players do you run through the midfield?
We'd like to think we've got probably 10 to 12 players that are capable of going through there. And again, that's great because, like I said before, with the Dane Swans of the world and Scott Pendlebury and Thomas and Wellingham and these guys having to spend some time forward, it opens up the space for guys like Beams and Blair and Cracker and Brent McCaffrey perhaps to go through there. So look, I suppose as the season goes, we'll find that more teams need to use more players through there, and especially if the guns, if you want to call them that, are going to spend more time on the ground. It'll come a time where they probably need a rest and can't play it all that week.
You tend to favour the one ruckman setup with a pinch hitter in Lee Brown. What changes in the midfield in terms of their structure and the way they approach the stoppage when it's Darren Jolly in the ruck as opposed to Lee Brown in the ruck? Yeah,
look, there are slight changes, obviously. You know, Darren is your traditional ruckman. He's a lot taller than Lee. He's also a lot heavier.
Yep.
So the boys, they adjust slightly to that. But again, it also depends on what opponent Lee goes in there against. Sometimes, if we're playing a side that has that similar philosophy, Lee's actually in there against someone of similar size. And if you have a look at his ruck work against people of similar stature, it's very, very good. So when that happens, it actually doesn't change too much.
Does it make it easier if Dane Swan spends time forward to shake his tags? Is he getting people run with him as much as probably he did a couple of years ago?
Look, Alistair, again, it depends on the team. Some teams run with the idea that you can tag someone. Other teams are very structure orientated and just let Swanee go and hope that their structure will gobble him up, so to speak. It doesn't make it easier. Look, if he's sitting forward and we're winning clearances and he's taking a mark and kicking a goal, yeah, that's easier. But if he's sitting forward and we're losing a couple of clearances, I think the box gets a little bit nervous.
At different stages, Mick Moldhouse has handed over the reins to the assistants, particularly in the NAB Cup. You're in charge for the semi-final against West Coast.
Yep. Did
you do anything different? I guess you still have to... I know it's a pretty much set in stone game plan, but everyone's a little bit different, the way you communicate, the type of messages you deliver. How did you find it? And it's obviously given you a taste for a lot more, I suspect.
Yeah, look, great experience. All the assistant coaches are really thankful to Mick and also to Jeff Walsh who set that program up. They're big on professional development at Collingwood, and if you're an assistant there, you're one of the beneficiaries of that. So that's absolutely fantastic. You take a couple of extra meetings during the week, so I think that experience is invaluable. So that's from a personal level. And Mick's also got the theory that giving the experience to his assistants, that exposure to do it, it can only help make the whole group stronger. So if we can have one of the strongest coaching groups going around, if he can help that, that's great. In terms of do you do differently, you're right. Like, I communicate differently to Mick, and Matty Lappin did it differently, and Bucks did it differently. In terms of the game plan, no, it's fairly set. I don't think we're going to come out and say, well, Mick, I'm just going to pull this move, and we'll worry about what you think.
Would have been courageous, wouldn't it?
Did you learn a lot? You obviously had the same experience coaching in the coach's box for Collingwood. Did you glean a lot out of that? That you've taken into your own coaching?
An absolutely invaluable experience. Yeah. I mean, you can be an assistant, I think, for 10, 12 years. Yeah. And if you've never had that experience of being in the hot seat and being the one who actually makes the calls on certain things, nothing will ever prepare you for that. So, you know, the process that Collingwood set up and that Mick helps develop his assistant coaches, and I was very lucky to get that opportunity too, is absolutely invaluable, and it's the best thing to prepare you to be an AFL coach.
Where do you go from here? I mean, if Mick Malthouse doesn't coach anywhere next year, do you stay at Collingwood, or are you trying to get your own job? Or is that an unfair question at this stage?
Well, it's a blunt question, actually.
Well, I mean, you were close to getting the Geelong job, weren't you?
No. I wasn't even interviewed for the Geelong job.
Well, that was a good bit of mail I got there.
Excellent bit of mail. Look, where do I go? Look, at the moment, my contract, I'm in negotiations with Collingwood to extend my contract. And, you know, at the moment, I'm at Collingwood for the rest of this year. And as Scotty knows, Mick is absolutely wonderful at making sure that everyone is playing their role and has their eye on the ball for this season, and everyone at Collingwood will do that, and what happens after that will work out in due course.
And Neeld will make a very good, you know, senior coach one day, but, you know, I think anyone who wants to be a senior coach, the best advice, you know, that I could give them is just concentrate on being the best assistant coach you can, and then people will recognise you for that and eventually offer you a senior job somewhere.
I suspect Mark's stocks are rising by the day, the way Collingwood are going at the moment. Don't forget, a real treat for Fox Sports viewers. We've got a brand new show starting Friday night. It's called The Greatest, hosted by Dwayne Russell, the man that got a little slap from Scotty a little bit earlier on in the show. But it's going to be fantastic. It's going to be so exciting to look back at some of the great categories of the game. We're kicking it off with villains on night one. And just before we let you gentlemen go, it's a question without notice. The greatest villain in the game doesn't necessarily have to be an opponent, Scotty. It could be a teammate if you wanted to go down that track. I'm not loading the gun for you.
Well, Dwayne Russell's close at the moment.
Benchy?
I've got him.
Really?
Yeah, he's a hard man. He used to put the fear of God into a few opponents.
I've grown over the pre-season.
Yeah, I'm shrinking down. Who's higher up the list, you or Chris?
Oh, I've got a lot of credit for all Chris's good deeds.
What about villains in your time in the game, Neely?
Yeah, I think sometimes it's not just villains on the field. Some of the off-field villains that were around the Geelong change rooms are guys like John Barnes and Gary Hocking, Dwayne Russell. They sort of spring to mind. Paul Couch wasn't too bad at the odd practical jokes along the villain line, so I think those guys... But I don't think you'll get footage of some of the things they got up to.
Probably good.
Now, one last question, mate, before we let you go too. And this might be a difficult one to answer, but who are the three most important players at Collingwood from a structural perspective?
Three most important... Well, I'll go three most important people at Collingwood from a structural point of view. One would be Mick.
On field.
Well, you'd look at your leaders and the way that they lead the rest of the team in terms of structures. We've got a very strong leadership group. Guys like Nick Maxwell, Scott Pendlebury, Dane Swan, Harry O'Brien, Luke Ball and Darren Jolly. They form the leadership group, and a lot falls to them in terms of the structures. So I'd say that lot.
I reckon Chris Dawes has become incredibly important for your structure too. He gives you that big target. He's learned to add second and third efforts to his game. He's a very imposing presence, and you need someone like that if you've got a Travis Cloke that really gets on his bike and leads up a lot. I reckon he's been pretty huge for the structure too. Yeah,
look, he has, and he's an improving player, but we won't put too much pressure on Dawes. He's only just beginning his AFL career, albeit he's a premiership player, but he's still played under 50 games, and look, he's tracking nicely, and he's certainly got some individual development to go before we start throwing some leadership things at him. Really appreciate you coming in and having a chat to us. It's been very enlightening for us. We wish you all the best for the season, albeit we don't necessarily want another Collingwood premiership. But mate, great catching up with you, and thanks for your time. Thanks, guys. Thanks, if you want to be a part of the show, it is particularly easy. All you have to do is go to foxsports.com.au/shows/AFL Insider, and we'd love to hear from you if you've got a question for any of the boys. Coming up next, we've got the coaches' votes, the Super Coach Team of the Week. That'll be interesting. We'll also preview the debut of the Gold Coast Saints.